page 361. So this Maamar, I chose this Maamar for two reasons. One reason is because it was said Shabbos Pinchas, which is in a few weeks, and that was around the time of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz. Yud Beis and Gimel Tammuz on the Chabad calendar is the day when the previous Rebbe, our author, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, was released from his sentence. Initially, on Gimel Tammuz, his life was spared and commuted to hard labor in a city called Kostroma. And then, about 9 days later, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz, those 2 days, he actually walked out, he left Kostroma. So this was and is a festival, a Hasidic festival in Lubavitch, in Chabad. And when the Litvaks came to complain to Rabbi Chaim Dalfin, who was the Rav of Vilna, right, during the 20s and 30s, and he had a strong yachas, even earlier, the 1910s, he had a strong yachas, a strong relationship with Reb Shalom Ber, the Rebbe Rashab of Lubavitch, and the previous Rebbe, and the Rebbe knew him as well. So they complained to him, why are these Lubavitch Hasidim always adding holidays? Another day, not to say Tachnun, etc., etc. So the famous response that Rabbi Chaim Moiser gave, and it's recorded in the writings of the previous Rebbe, is he said in Yiddish, he said, bei uns fehlt und bei sie kommt zu, which means by us it's lacking, and by them there's more and more. And what did he mean? During the time of the 20s and 30s, the assimilation in Russia, the 1910s as well, the assimilation in Russia was tremendous with all the isms and communism and all the isms, and people were leaving, the youth were leaving and becoming communists and leaving the fold, the frum fold of their parents and grandparents. And this was a big struggle that Reb Chaim Moiser and the Chafetz Chaim and Reb Chaim Brisker and all the other Gedoyle Halitoyim, the Litvish Rosh Hashiva and Talmidei Chachamim and Rabbanim were dealing with. And the Rabbeim, the Lubavitch Rabbeim, were also dealing with it. However, percentage-wise, the Lubavitchers had more success in keeping more of their youth on the path, and this was because of the Rebbe Rashab and Frierdiker Rebbe's, in particular the previous Rebbe's, underground yeshiva movement that he started when Stalin gave the edict in 1922 to shut down yeshivas and Talmud Torahs and Chadorim. And the previous Rebbe gathered a group of 10 Hasidim, and these Hasidim were made a pact with him, an oath, in Hebrew, a krisis bris. They made a covenant like a bris, and that they will do whatever it is to keep Yiddishkeit going, even if it means death. It was very, very, very paramount, historical issue that was done in the 20s, 22 or maybe 27, I forget the particular year. But this is what Reb Chaim Moiser meant by Zei Kum Tzu. That by the Lubavitch Chassidim, the fact that they have another holiday to not say Tachnun and to celebrate isn't just a ceremony. It's demonstrative of actual practical good results in the community for the Jewish community. So this Maamar that we're about to learn was said on Shabbos, again, whether it was said then or it's just dated that day. It's dated Beis Samach Daled with the help of Hashem. We always begin by reading the title of the Maamar because the Rebbe and the Rabbeim would write their own title to a Maamar, meaning there is significance to it. So he titled this Maamar Shabbos Parshas Pinchas, B'Seuda, during the meal, Tovshin, 1940. And why did he have a Suda? Not just because it was a Shabbos Suda. Again, I don't know if that was Yud Beis or Gimel Tammuz. Please take off whoever you mute yourself. But it was definitely around the time of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. So whether this Suda is the Yud Beis Tammuz Suda or not, I don't know. I'll check in Yirtz Hashem. But this is the date, and this is the reason for this Maamar that the Rebbe said as a thanksgiving for his own Geula, for Hashem sparing his life. You know, Chasidim of the previous Rebbe, like my wife Zayda and others, for them Gimel Tammuz, from 1927 on, when his life was spared, was like the biggest Yom Tov. For them personally, was like the biggest Yom Tov in the Chabad calendar. I don't mean, in the Chabad, I don't mean the Rosh Hashanah, Pesach. I'm talking about the Hasidic Yom Tovim, because their Rebbe's life, it was very personal. My wife Zayda and Rabbi Mendel Futterfass and other Hasidim, Rabbi Shem Tov and other Hasidim, they worked for the previous Rebbe and his secretaries in the front lines. They were amongst the Hasidim who had the Mesiras Nefesh. For them, it wasn't just a story like for me and you. It's a story. I'm telling you, historical information. For them, it was real. So every Gimel Tammuz, Reb Zalman Serebransky would fabring, and I don't think he said Tachnun. And this is before Gimel Tammuz, that when the Rebbe paid the stalkers of our Rebbe 26 years ago, talking about from 1927. But this is a Maamar associated with Yud Beis Tammuz. 9 days later, in other words, when he on Gimel Tammuz, when his life was spared, he still would have suffered tremendously and might have passed on because of the conditions in Kastrama. So on Yud Beis, when he got the final edict that he can leave scot-free Kastrama, so that was for overall Hasidim worldwide, that was like the final stamp of approval. This is the way the Rebbe looks at it, what I'm telling you now, that his work was sanctioned from on high. Because if not, he would have been shot or died from hunger or whatever. And the fact is, the Eibushter saved his life miraculously, mamish miraculously, and there's details. If you never read it, you should read the account of the previous Rebbe himself writes of him being in prison. It's amazing. It's scary, it's sad, but it's amazing. It's amazing that he could have survived that. Okay, when he initially was taken to the prison in Leningrad, right? I think in Leningrad, and his wife, his mother, and his grandson came to visit him, and I read an account of that, and they had to look through. Oh no, they were not allowed. Initially, they were not allowed to go even to his door. So the little boy, the grandson, asked the mother, "Why can't I see my grandfather? And I see other people." So she said, "Because your grandfather has been accused as a counter-revolutionary, and she didn't tell him he's sentenced to death, but that was the edict at the time, and because of that, there's no contact with humans." Anyway, besides the guards, after a while, they got permission, and they were able to see him through a little window or something like that. So it was a very, very trying time for the previous Rebbe. So when the final verdict was that he's totally free on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, it was a great simcha. There were Hasidim who in Moscow were making somersaults in the street. You have to understand, this is the height of the KGB. Last December, when I was in Moscow, I passed the building of the KGB on, I think, Buryanka, I forget now the name, a massive building, and I was told that is till today the major KGB building. Imagine how it was in 1927. And also, at the corner of where the main Chabad shul is, where Rabbi Lazar, Ber Lazar has his main Chabad shul, which is a 7-story building, on the corner, there's a KGB building. And you can see it diagonally across. And Lubavitch Chabad has a 7-story building diagonally across the day in Moscow. It's not to believe. It's like mamish a Mashiach experience. So anyway, this Maamar is part of the Thanksgiving that the Rebbe gave, and as in Chabad tradition, the Lubavitcher Rebbe would express these type of thanks through a Maamar Chasidus, in addition to a Sicha and a talk and a letter. But the Maamar Chasidus solidified from on high, because the belief is that in the Maamar Chasidus it's called Divrei Elokim Chayim. In Lubavitch Yoni, in Chabad, the Maamar Chasidus is Divrei Elokim Chayim, which its acronym is Dach, Dalet Aleph Ches, or DACH. Dalet Aleph with the two dittos, Ches. Divrei, the Dalet, Aleph, Elokim, Ches Chayim. Divrei Elokim Chayim, the words of the living God. So the belief is that the words of the Eibishter comes through the throat and the mouth of the tzaddik, the Rebbe that says the Maamar, and hence that solidifies whatever the experience is. And that's why in Chabad tradition, the Maamar was always the stamp of approval and issue that put things in its perspective and solidified things, and we looked into the Maamar to see if the Rebbe alludes to something. I'll give you another example. In 1979, Rabbi David Okanov, a Russian Jew, was murdered cold-bloodedly in Crown Heights. It was a very intense time. There's a family in Lubavitch called Okanov. They live in Crown Heights. They're in charge, I think, of Free, the organization, or were involved with the Russian Jews, helping Russian Jews in the 70s and 80s. Anyway, so he was murdered, Nebuch. And the Rebbe, the following Shabbos, during the Shiva, during the Maamar that he said on Parshas Noach, in middle of the Maamar, out of nowhere, it seemingly had no connection to the Maamar, he spoke about, he didn't mention his name, but he spoke about the person who was murdered cold-bloodedly, and he connected it somehow to the Maamar. Why did he do that? During a Maamar. A Maamar is godly concepts, is esoteric concepts. You see how we learn what we learn in the Maamarim. So because the answer is in Lubavitch, by the Rabbeim in particular, the Maamar, solidified and made things important. So, he was elevating the neshama of Reb David Okanov in the Maamar, and he said wonderful things about him, that he was a Baal Mesilas Nefesh in Russia and everything else. So, as an aside, sometimes when you have a query and a quandary and you don't know and you're lost, take out the Maamar that we learned during that, not that because we're learning it, but since we're learning Maamarim every week, you might actually find some advice and help in the Maamar that we, I'm talking about things, I'm not talking about, character issues. I'm talking about, should I invest, should I not invest? Should I move here, should I move there? Should I send my kids here or there? Don't be surprised if you'll find it in a Maamar, but you have to pay attention. You have to really pay attention and not put your agenda in the Maamar. Let the Maamar lead you. If you start telling the Maamar what to do, you ain't finding the answer in the Maamar. Anyway, so a Maamar Chasidus for Yud Beis Tammuz isn't just, the Rebbe is giving thanks. He's connecting that and basically saying that my personal liberation on Yud Beis Tammuz is sanctioned by God. The whole thing was by God. My imprisonment was by God. My sparing my life was by God, and everything else. Another reason I chose the Maamar is because the pasuk over here, which is from Tehillim, Ahallah Hashem b'chayai, I will praise Hashem with my life. Azamra lelikai, I will sing to Hashem b'oidi, with all my might, with all my strength. So, it's a pasuk in Tehillim. David HaMelech praises Hashem, and But we learned earlier, Hillel, I remember in particular, you had asked me about that interpretation of that we learned already once in a previous Maamar, and it was very brief. So hopefully in this Maamar, I'm getting back to something that you asked about 2-3 months ago. I don't know if you remember, but I do. And we learned it in a Maamar. Moshe Braun should remember it too, because he learned the Maamar too. So in this Maamar, we'll see more language. Remember, we were talking about...
Before we dive in, I want to ask a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
2 questions. One is, the way you're talking about a Maamar reminded me of kind of the idea that you see in many Sifrei Chasidus of an arousal from above and an arousal from below. The idea, and so I was wondering if that's sort of a concept, that the Maamar is like a response when you recognize like a moment of heavenly intercession, so to speak. That was one question. And the second one was were each of the 7 Rebbes of Chabad in prison, except for the last Rebbe?
Well, the tradition is that we know about the 5 out of the 7. We know kind of historically or factually. Okay, we have documentation with dates and letters and pictures, pictures meaning the artist took a drawing of the Alter Rebbe while he was in prison. Anyway, the Rebbe Marash, the 4th Rebbe, Rebbe Shmuel, Rebbe Marash, I researched and found evidence that he also was, that he wasn't himself in prison, but because of him, a chassid, Rabbi Naimark, in a city called Staratov, which is either in Russia or Ukraine, was imprisoned and almost lost his life. And I wrote about that in one of my Chabad portraits. It's a whole story, not for now, a very interesting story. This happened in 1880, 81, 82, a few years before the Rebbe Marash passed away. So that period, it seems like, is what when in Lubavitch they say all of the Rabbeim were in prison, they're referring to that story of the 1880s with this Rabbi Naimark who because of the Rebbe Marash ended up in jail, and it's a story for itself. And not that he had any issue with it. He put a blame on himself that spared the life of the Rebbe Marash. Otherwise, the Marash would have been in jail. So it seems to me that that's what the Hasidim and the Rebbe and the Rabbeim meant, that the Rabbeim, the Lubavitcher Rebbes, were all in jail. But technically, I have not found that the Marash was in jail. Okay, that's the answer to the first question. The second question, what was your second question? Oh, about that was the second question. Now, the first question, I see it differently. It's not, the Maamar Chasidus is not Isarusa de la Tata, Isarusa de la Eila. It's rather Isarusa de la Eila to Isarusa de la Tata. The belief is that Hashem is speaking through and giving the information through the mouth of the tzaddik. So that's an Isarusa de la Eila experience. Then we take that and use it. But it's definitely, the concept is called in the Chassidish Sfarim. Not, by the way, in Chabad it's about the Maimorim, but overall in Chassidic literature, you have this concept of Shechina medaberes mitoich groiner shel Moshe Rabbeinu. The divine presence speaks through the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. That is a basic Baal Shem Tov belief, that the tzaddik's words are the Shechina going through it. So where does it begin? Of course, the mouthpiece is the tzaddik's mouth, but the inspiration coming is, use the word intercession, the inspiration is coming from on high, from a place that's from Hashem, coming through the mouth. So I see that as not Isarusa de la Tata de la Eila, but rather de la Eila to de la Tata. Okay, let's get to learning some of the Maamar. Ahallah Hashem b'chayei. Again, if you have your copies, 361. Azam relikai b'oidi. David HaMelech, in praising Hashem, says, I will praise Hashem b'chayei. I praise Hashem b'chayei with all my life. Azam relikai b'oidi. I sing to Hashem b'oidi with my might. Perish b'chayei. Says the Rebbe, what does chayei mean? Because seemingly it's like repetitious. I praise Hashem. What's the difference between chayei and oidi? So he says, Perish b'chayei hi hanishama. This refers to the soul. I praise Hashem with my soul, and over oidi, and I praise and I give thanks to, I sing to Hashem be'oidi hu haguf. This is the body. And why is guf called oidi? Because oidi has also another meaning, in addition to being might. Also, oidi comes from the word od, something else. Shehaguf hurak oidi. The body is only a second thought, ancillary. It's something else. Shehu tofel levad. The guf is tofel, ancillary to the soul. And that's why David HaMelech says, although I praise you, Hashem, with my chayai, my soul, and also I sing to you, Hashem, with oidi, nevertheless, oidi is what? Oidi is it's only oidi, it's tofel, because if you compare the body, the guf, to the neshama, one is ikar, one is primary, and one is tofel, one is ancillary. So here comes the Rebbe's question. Why does David HaMelech make a distinction between the soul and the body? The b'chaya, that b'chaya, which refers to the soul, maskir shem Hashem, the shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. He mentions what name of God? Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which we know Yaakov is the highest form of Hashem's name, the Tetragrammaton, the name that equals 26, which represents the supernatural forces of Hashem. So why, when he says Ahallah Hashem, but when he talks about B'chayai, he uses Yud Kei Vav Kei, U'v'yoidi, and when it comes to V'yoidi, Shehu Aguf, which refers to the body, Maske Shem Elikim, he mentions Shem Elikim. So this is the Rebbe's question: why the change in the usage of Hashem's name? The idea is the Shnei Hashem Hashem Velokim He Moker Oiris Vakelim. So he introduces a concept in Kabbalah brought in the Chasidus that the two names of Hashem, there are 7 holy names. The two names Avi of Hashem and Elokim, they are the source of what's called the oros, the lights, the energies, the kelim, and the receptacles, the vessels. The Shem Hashem, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei Mekoir Ha'oros, is the source of the energies of the lights. The Shem Elokim, and the name Elokim Mekoir HaKelim, is the source of Kelim. Now what does this mean, Yoni? That means that when you have a Yud Kei Vav Kei experience, you're uniting, you're focusing on the energy, on the aura. When you have an Elokim experience, you're focusing on God as God is expressed through the Kelim. Now people make a mistake. They think the Kelim are restricting the aura, right? You have fluid, and the fluid can flow endlessly, and when you pour it into a keli, the keli limits the amount of fluid. From that example, what does that imply? That the keli is limiting to the fluid, to the aura. And that's true as well. However, it's not that the keli is not influential. The keli is also influential. In other words, there's 2 aspects to a keli. There is the restrictive mode of the keli, the containing mode of the keli, or the hiding mode of the keli, the concealing mode of the keli, and then there is the influence of the keli. In other words, how much influence, how much hashpah do you have from a keli? A limited amount of hashpah. So a keli is also mashpia. So Kabbalah says that this is the difference between the hashpah coming from Yud Kei Vav Kei versus the hashpah coming from Elokim. you guys, you know why I'm saying this? You're just standing there. I don't know if you understand. Because if you say that it comes from Elokim, Elokim also gives the world light, energy, right? It's brought in places that the supernatural forces of God in the world are from Yud Kei Vav Kei. The natural forces of God in the world are what? Are Elokim. Meaning that Teva, nature, the sun's out. I'm looking at the sun now. The trees are here, right? Everything else about nature. Is that a limitation? Is that a concealment? Or is that a revelation? What's the answer? It's both. It's the way Hashem is reflected through the concealment. So if you don't stop and meditate and contemplate on HaKadosh Baruch Hu vis-a-vis nature, you could come to the conclusion, Chas v'sholem Rachmana litzlan, like heretics do, there is no creator, the world's here on itself. Yeah, I see the sun, but who says God made it? I don't see God here, I see the sun, I see trees. So the Torah teaches us, no. What you see is coming from an energy of Hashem called Elokim, which the modus operandi, the makeup of Elokim is to give hashpah in a concealed way. And that's what we call a keli. I just wanted to clarify that for you once for the record, kind of, that you should understand that as most of the time in Chasidus Chabad, when we talk about or and keli, you will hear the explanation that the keli is restricting, concealing, and all that. And that's true. But it's restricting and concealing an energy. It's not that it's restricting. It's the or as it comes through the keli. And that's why it's called Shem Elokim. And that's what the Rebbe says over here. So the Makar, in short, in Kabbalah it says, Yoni, the source of Oiros is Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's limitless. It just goes and flows, and you see Hashem completely, without any question. Whereas the way the way God reflects Himself and gives the world Hashpah through Elokim, which is is through Kalim. But both are holy. By the way, this Baruch, this is what the Alter Rebbe says in Egeres HaKodesh Chaf. Iyu v'chayoyichad, iyu v'garmo yichad. Right? It's Aramaic. Hashem, iyu v'chayoyi, and his chayis, i.e. his oir chad, are one. V'iyu, and just as Hashem is one with his oir, iyu v'garmo yichad, he's also one with his keli. And Alter Rebbe goes about one of the hardest themes in the Sefer HaTanya, in the Igeres HaKodesh, letter 20, and he opens up for us a tremendous insight in this whole concept of the unity of Hashem vis-a-vis Or and vis-a-vis Keli. That's that whole Igeres HaKodesh over there. But without going into details, and there's tremendous amount of details there, very important details in understanding the unity of Hashem, we understand from the opening phrase, that's the same Iyu. Now there is the way the Iyu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, expresses himself through Yud Kei Vav Kei, and there is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses himself through Elokim. That's what we're learning over here. Continuing. And he says, the guf u'neshama, so now the guf, the body, and the soul, hey moir v'keli, they are oir v'keli. They're the light and the vessels. Therefore the soul, which is oir, masked bo shem yud kei vav kei. He answers the question right here. The question that he asked 3 lines ago, he answers. That's why when it comes to the neshama, which is the embodiment of Or, that's why he uses Yud Kei Vav Kei. And V'haguf, and the body, Shukli, which is the receptacle to the neshama, Masker Boy Shem Elikim, he mentions the name Shem Elikim. Finished now with the Kabbalah, now we go into more of the Chasidus. what is the idea? What are their ideas as far as soul of man? How in a man's avoid, in a man's activity and daily behavior? There are two types of service. Harishain, it's called avoida mitzad haguf, a service coming from the perspective of the body. And number two, v'hasheni avoida mitzad haneshama, it's an avoida coming from the perspective of the soul. And he explains. The avoida mitzad haguf, an avoida that comes from the guf, hu halev nishbar, that means the heart is shattered, contrite. Haba mimerirus, it comes from frustration. Frustrated about what? Not that you didn't make lots of money in the stock market last week, but rather richuka melikus, that you come to a sensation and a feeling, I'm so far from godliness. And although I perceive a godly concept, I learn Chasidus, I learn Torah, and more so, you hear Moshe, more so that sometimes not only is it hasaga, you understand, but you're margish, you have a regesh, you have a feeling. It's not just an intellectual trip, but you actually have a hergish of godliness, not a hergish of yourself or a hergish of knowledge, but you sense and smell some godly feeling in the experience. He says in Yiddish, es ist nicht nur, was versteht Göttlichkeit, not only is it that he understands godliness, nor euch, but more so, was fühlt Göttlichkeit. The word hergish in Yiddish is fühlt. Yoni, he feels godliness. Nevertheless, so you're not talking about to someone who is just a Drake cup, you know? You're talking about to someone that is connected here, right? Nevertheless, it's not a basic foundational point in his attitude. His attitude, he calls here hanocha atzmis, in his essence. It's not, it's not like waking up in the morning and getting dressed and breathing. It's not the same like those things are. Like he says, you can't compare his understanding and feeling for godliness that he might have to the basic human life things like understanding his body, and his needs, which become part of him. And when a person, the Rebbe gives here a very, he's talking to someone who, understands a godly concept and someone who feels it, So he says, even such a person gets frustrated and feels that he's distant from God. Why? Because he doesn't see that as he doesn't see that experience as one with him. Right? There's the famous Chabad tune. Es nesach, trinken, trinksach, was soll men tun, als es daven sich nicht. Es nesach, schlafen, schlafzach, was soll men tun, als es leren sich nicht. And it repeats itself. What's the meaning? Eating, I eat. Drinking, I drink. Sleeping, I sleep. What should we do that I don't daven and learn automatically like I eat, sleep, and drink? Tell me the last time you met someone who needed premeditation to eat, sleep, and drink. It's natural. After a fast day, you're like a hungry bear, right? You're tired, you fall asleep Friday night at the table, into the chicken soup. Your head goes into the chicken soup. You're tired. Do we feel that way about learning and davening? We crave to learn and daven, and we feel like we're dirty. We need a shower. We haven't showered in a 2-3 day Yom Tov. In America, the 3-day Yom Tov is like worse than sitting in jail. So it's like and actually, at Yisrael probably it's worse because you guys usually don't have 3 days Yom Tovim. But the point being that even someone who's learning and davening and feeling, but when he compares that to eating and sleeping, he realizes, I'm so far from that. Because it's not nisatzim. Look at the word, Avi, he used the word shemisatzmim imo. Misatzmim comes from the root word etzem. It's not your etzem, it's not your essence. And when you think about this, you become really frustrated in a positive way. It says, I'm so far. So what can I do to get closer? Not what. Therefore, I'll never get there. That's not a Yiddish thought, and not a Chasidus thought, and not a Litvish thought. The idea is to come closer to the Eibishter. And the fact that you have such a thought, which involves what he calls merirus, holy frustration, that's gewaldig. That's unbelievable. As long as it bothers you. And that, by the way, just for a moment, that's so important in Avodas Hashem, this Nekuda. We're not looking to see where you're at. We're looking to see if it concerns you that you're not better than you, and you're not as good as you could be, and you're not. That's the issue. And when it bothers them, and I'm talking about truly bothers them, not just lip service, then that nekuda, that point, is the highest form of tshuva. And I don't mean halachically, I'm talking about now practically. And the highest form of being an Oved Hashem. If anyone thinks that the great Chasidim and the great Tzaddikim and the great Rosh Hashivas didn't have frustrations, they should think again. That's the whole Nakuda. The whole Nakuda of an Oved Hashem is the frustration. This is our theme in the Alter Rebbe's 9 chapters, the psychology chapters, as I like to call them, from 26 through 34. It's all about finding simcha vis-a-vis what? Through frustration. Because that's ultimate simcha. Ultimate simcha is that I'm on a path, and I'm working on it, and it bothers me, and I look every day to grow. That's simcha. Simcha is not someone who, taps his belly and says, I've accomplished so much. That's a yesh. That's a gaiva. Simcha, the Alter Rebbe in those 9 chapters opens up our eyes and says, simcha is through merirus. And that's what he says over here in the Maamar. Let's continue. And feeling that he's so distant from this meditation that he shares with us, and his soul is so frustrated, and he cries with frustration, meaning, it doesn't mean, it can mean crying literally, or it cries inside. He's really distraught. And through this contriteness and frustration, you know what happens? You shatter the coarseness. We've been speaking so much about the chumriyas, right? Moshe asked me last week, about the steak and and all that. So let's not choose steak. I got to get away from that example. But chumriyas, you know what chumriyas is? Getting pleasure from the gashmias. There is gashmias, but you get pleasure. You make a big deal about it. Like I told you the other day, this fellow was well-meaning, a good guy, but he made such an issue of the food, that there was a lack of food at a seal. And again, he was well-meaning, but at the end of the day, what's important? So there wasn't so much food. Chumriyas, in other words, can you really say that you want better food because of the cause, or you want better food because you want to taste better food and have more food. And the same is with all pleasures in life. You know, I'm exercising. Am I exercising lishma, or am I exercising shaloi lishma? I'm exercising, because I enjoy exercising, or I'm exercising because I need to exercise for my health. And there's a very big difference. And this is a main teaching in Musar Svarim and in Chasidus Svarim. And the Rebbe alludes to it here. Vayideyach meridus valev nishbar. When you come to a point of contriteness and frustration, the one thing that it does, at least, and which is an important beginning, is it's mizbatel achumrius. It annuls, it destroys, it removes the corporeality, the corruptkeit, the coarseness, the nizdachech hagashmius, and then the gashmius becomes refined. So you can eat your steak, and you can do your exercise, and you can have the pleasures of life, but they're for a cause. They're for a cause. And this is the difference between our religion and lahavdil, the Buddhists and other religions, where asceticism is a mainstay teaching in their methodology and philosophy and all that. In Yiddishkeit, the rabbi, the Kohen Gadol, is praised for procreating, not for being celibate. And the Gemara tells us that the Talmidim, I forget of which sage now, were in his bedroom. I mean, could you imagine? And they hid. And they wanted to see how he procreates and unites with his wife. I mean, today, if you said it, you say he's a pedophile, he's a lowlife, he's geferlich. It's a Gemara. When a Gemara says something, it's in the Gemara. And the Gemara does not say it to belittle the sage. The Gemara wants to bring out how the Talmidim wanted to see how you can take such an issue that's so pleasure-driven and so physical, and make of it a holy experience. And they couldn't come to that. They couldn't see it. Why? Because they tried and they failed. So they said, we have to go to our Rebbe. We have to go to our rabbi. We have to go to our sage. And he will teach us. And this is what the Gemara says. You can jump up and down, but the Gemara says it. I mean, I just added a few adjectives to, clarify the Gemara. But that's the basic Gemara. So what do we understand from this? What do we understand? That Moshe, and I say this in particular to you because you had this question. Again, it's not to negate Gashmias, it's to negate Chumrias. So yes, Musar and Chasidus and the Ramban on Kedosh and Tiyu say, get rid of Chumrias. Chumrias has no place in the Jewish experience. Gashmias has a place and a very important place. So the Rebbe says this over here, and we'll finish with this today. The Rebbe says there's two types of avodas. Avodas haguf and avodas haneshama. And now he's talking about, which one is he talking about here? The avodah mitzad haguf. Okay, I want to remember for tomorrow. This is, by the way, based on which chapter in Tanya? Yonason? Your old yeshiva bacher? Chapter 42. Perek Membeis in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe introduces to us this concept. The Frierdiker Rebbe takes it now and puts it into more practical psychological terms and avodah terms. Avodas haguf, meaning take your body, meditate. Now, also, I just want to point out, what is the way the Rebbe suggests coming to this removal of Gashmias? Is it by fasting? Is it by not speaking? Is it by shuckling? No. It's Chabad. He uses the Chabad style, meditation. He wants us to meditate on the awesomeness of Hashem and how our experience has not yet become part of us. It's an adjunct to us. And he wants you to think about that. That's called hisbonenus. This is another classical example of Chabad hisbonenus. You don't have to shake for this, and you don't have to cry for this, and you don't have to fast for this. You got to use your brain. You got to sit down and be quiet and put your talus over your head, or go into a room and don't, without your phone and cell phone and gadgets, and just turn off and focus on Hashem and where are you in comparison. And this is Chabad's bonus, and he gives us a very particular one. And he says when you do that, it will help you remove slowly the chumriyas. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
On the chumriyas, you mentioned the chumriyas. There's no place for chumriyas. Is that what you said?
Yes. It's not. I said it's full in the Sfarim of Musar for sure, and even in Chasidus. Yes. There's gashmis.
So then maybe I have the wrong perspective. But then why there's certain chumras that we see?
No, not chumras. Stop, Moshe. Chumras and chumriyas are two different words.
Okay, so explain. All right. Okay.
I'm glad you asked. Chumra means astringency.
Right.
Chumra is a different word than chumriyus. Chumriyus means corporeal, grub.
Okay.
So there's no place for grubkeit, coarseness.
As opposed to gashmias.
As opposed to gashmias.
Right. Okay, I understand now. I was confused on that.
Okay, good. No, that's why we're learning, to ask a question and clarify. Anyone else? Yes.
Rabbi Dalfin, there is something about it in Chasidus that talks about the chamor, the donkey. Chamor is looking that the two characteristics about the donkey. One is that even though it's very hot, he's cold. And the other one is that he doesn't move. He's very stubborn. So chumriyah, it doesn't want to move. You don't want to move from where you are. You're stuck in where you are. You got to move. You got to hit the donkey in order to get it to move.
Right.
And the donkey also it gets excited about physical things. Got to learn to calm down, you know. It gets hot about things that are cold about things that are hot.
And thank you for saying that, Yonis. It happens to be, the Gemara says that Tammuz, we're in Tammuz, right? That Tammuz is like the hottest month. So it says, what Yonis is also referring to, it says that Chamra, the donkey, B'tkufas Tammuz, in the period of the month of Tammuz, where it's so boiling hot outside, and it should, be more excited, Kridale, from the word kar, it's cold. So here it is, the Toikev HaShemesh in Bet Shemesh. Boys, the Shemesh is really baking. I was there in Tammuz. I think I was there in Tammuz. Anyway, in the summer, it's really baking on you, right? So spiritually, spiritually, what is that a symbol of, Moshe Myers? It's a symbol of godliness is baking the world. And nevertheless, we're like a chamor. We're like a donkey, like Yonason said. We're cold and we don't want to budge, even in Tammuz. So when we think about these things and think about and learn them, it'll help us move. Guys, have a great day. Anyone else want to say? Yes. Anyone else with a point? Okay. Hatzlocha in your avodas haguf till tomorrow. Shalom.
Amen. Shalom.